Hi everyone! Today I'm going to show you how I painted this fall watercolor scene. So first, I'm starting with a wet on wet technique on top part of the paper. I'm just applying clean water to the top area and then I'm dropping some blue paint. You can use any blue that you like. I am using ultramarine. And then for the trees, I start with a light layer of yellow. You can use any shades of yellow that you like. Still, I'm using wet on wet technique. But for the leaf, make sure to leave some white spaces so it's not all one color. Now I'm painting the green bushes. Again, the technique is wet on wet. So I'm starting with the sap green for the first layer. And then I'm adding a little bit of forest green for more detail and texture. Now I'm adding the second layer for the leaves. So I'm adding a bit of orange on top of the yellow to show some variety in the leaves. But we don't want to turn all the yellow parts completely orange, just a bit for depth. So this is the second layer of our tree. And we are adding these extra details while it's wet. Okay, so for this part I'm making again wet on wet technique, making this part wet. I'm going to add a little bit of yellow on this part and again adding a little bit of more details onto the bushes to make it very clear and green. Yeah, we're using beautiful yellow. Some yellow on this part. Again, another wet on wet technique on the sandy part, making this part completely wet. So my water is not that clean, but it's better for you to use totally clean jar of water. I'm using burnt sienna, the diluted burnt sienna with lots of water, so it's very light, the color for this sandy part. I'm using more color. I'm using this burnt sienna, more pigment actually from my color to make it a little bit darker. Okay, now again I'm adding another layer of like orange for the leaves. Now I'm using a cadmium scarlet for adding more depth and more variety of colors. At this stage my background of the tree is kind of dry, but it's very nice. It's going to help me to have like some sort of texture. Now I'm using more pigment of like the burnt sienna to show like this sandy part, the sands. and make it like a little bit more like realistic or like more details. For the river, I'm using wet on wet technique. I'm just using like this blue. I'm using ultramarine blue, a little bit with Krelian blue from the palette, and just adding the blue onto the dry paper. But now I am just washing my brush and trying to softening the edges. My brush is damp, so I'm softening the edges. You can use any blue color that you might like. Now I'm adding a little bit more details with more pigment of the blue. It's Krelian blue. I'm adding like more details on that part. Perfect. So once everything is dry, now I'm using just like dry on dry technique and adding the tree trunks. For this I am using the raw umber dip of the brown. So this is brown. You can use any brown that you like. Just drawing these tree trunks. Now I'm adding branches. And I'll do the same for this tree. And I'm adding branches. You can just add random branches there. Now I'm adding more details onto the sands. Again, using dry on dry technique. I'm getting these pigments directly from my palette, so there's no water diluted into that color. It's just absolute pigment to add like more details, more sands to this part, and adding a little bit more texture. And a little bit more texture, so somehow to feel that the trees are not like on the air, they're actually on the ground. So I'm adding a little bit more brown there, and then just with a damp clean brush, softening the edges to feel like my trees are actually on the ground. And I'm using the last layer of the leaves into my trees for more details. Right now I'm using cadmium red. I combined it with cadmium scarlet, so it's a little bit more deep, more orange deep. And I'm adding just some touch of leaves. just on some parts of the tree to show the depths. Make it some part of it just a little bit more darker. Now I'm using this technique of a splatter, a bit of a splatter with some cadmium scarlet, to actually give the leaves more density and lively look. And there we go. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed that. Let me know if you have any questions. Please don't forget to like and subscribe.